Hey all, it's Zach Lokes. This video is a look at a newly formed permaplot. This is going to give a glimpse into what you will have on your land immediately after you go through the processes of forming permabeds and forming a new plot from scratch. Whether you use a two-wheel tractor with, any sort of implements that are, involved in that process, whether it's you're using a rotary plow or whether you're using a swivel rotary plow or the power ridger, any of those types of equipment, or whether you're doing this all with hand tools and you're making use of tools like digging forks and spades, and you're actually going through the process of creating your beds 100% out of hand tools, you're going to end up with a plot that is similar at the end of the day. You want to have, first of all, a series of uniformed raised garden beds. And again, these are earthen beds. The primary style of permabeds is an earthen permabed because it has so many advantages, including making weed management a lot easier and mechanized, while also making sure that you have really good soil cores and soil conservation cores so that you have a productive garden. This is what it's going to look like. Uniform. All of these beds are going to have the same architecture. They're going to have the same bed top width. They're going to have the same path width. They're going to have the same bed height. They're going to have the same slope of the shoulder, the degree of slope. They're going to have the same overall material in the bed. If you're creating your bed out of a local soil, or if you've already amended it, they're going to have the same material. And ultimately, they're going to come together as a complete permaplot. And this is, a term I use for a permaplot is a term I use for a plot of garden that is using these permabeds and has the goal to actually eventually integrate a lot of biodiversity in an organized form. As you'll see in other videos, a lot of the goal of the permabed system is to have these uniform, really good soil health inside the beds, but that uniformity in that healthy soil is allowing you to actually create a really great edible ecosystem style garden where you're patterning biodiversity. And having uniform beds and having the soil conservation core allows you to grow a lot more variety and make better use of that variety in terms of a regenerative garden system. So what we see, to get back to this, in a finished permaplot is a series of uniform beds, uniform bed top, path, etc. This means that it's going to be the same width from the shoulder top to the shoulder top at one end. This means there's going to be the same width from the shoulder bottom to the shoulder bottom for that path. There's going to be a similar slope. There's going to be a similar overall bed height. Everything is going to be the same. Now, if you build it from a two-wheel tractor or you build it from hand tools, there may be slight variations because a two-wheel tractor is going to build the bed a little differently. You may end up with a final height that's a little bit different than if you built them by hand tools. But if you're aiming for a specific height or a specific width, you can achieve that with either one of these systems, hand tools or two-wheel tractor, or even, of course, a four-wheel tractor system is also possible to do this with. So, but one of the differences is that there's going to be heights and widths that are a little easier to achieve or naturally achieve, little variations that will occur, and it just depends on the settings you have the equipment. So if you're going through and you have your settings at something on a two-wheel tractor and you end up with a height that is, 8 inches and you're aiming for 6 inches, you might decide, well, 8 inches is fine. I'm just going to roll with that. But if you're aiming for a very specific height, then you'll want to break that bed down. And that is a really important aspect of where you end up with in a finishing process. Because at the end of the day, the bed itself, its architecture, is a roughed in architecture after you finish this plot. This means that, this might be a little bit lumpy on top. This is not a fully finished bed. And it might be a little bit lumpy, it might be a little uneven, but your architecture points are fairly constant. And this is the finishing process, to go through and refine that. But it also means that at this point you have some opportunity to create adjustments. If you find that a width is not consistent, then that is when you come in and you finish it. And that's part of that finishing process, is to knowing that we're aiming for this, but it might not be all ideal. Another thing you'll find is that after finishing your permaplot, you're going to usually have a period where this is all growing in cover crop. So you might find that you have cover crop across the land like this, and this is how it goes into the winter. Or you might find that what you've actually done is you've laid in a composted manure on top, or like a manure that has like more debris, more material in it, so to speak. And that's because this is a good stage to put in something that's going to take time to break down. And then you're going to find that if you have either of these situations, you're going to go into the winter either with cover crop or with this manure and covering it with a tarp. So either of these scenarios, and you could have put the composted manure in under the cover crop as well. But that's to say, this is really what you're going to find a finished permaplot. If you follow the processes that I've described in my previous videos, this is what you end up with. And it's usually being done so that you're ending up with this going into the fall. The best time to do all this earthwork stage, this primary land preparation and this permaplot forming, is late summer. So going into the fall and into the winter, you're either going to have this uniform plot that's a little bit rough, but still finished, in terms of its actual layout and its consistency. And these beds are either going to be in a composted manure that's covered with a tarp, or they're going to be in compost manure that's been cover cropped, or they simply have just been cover cropped if you didn't have that, or maybe you integrated the manure in ahead of time before building the permaplot, which is also another strategy. So going into that winter period, this is what you end up with. You end up with a bunch of uniform permabeds that form a whole permaplot. Whatever your specific goal was in terms of the quantity of beds, they'll of course be, lining up really nicely with your edges, having left a perimeter between, say, this and like a fence, or this and a road to the next building, etc. But either way, you're going to end up with a overall plot that is exactly as it was designed out to be, and it's roughly ready to go, and it's in a holding pattern with either a top dressing of composted manure and a tarp, or composted manure and or cover crop, seeing it through the winter. And this is going to protect it. The tarp and the cover crop is going to protect the integrity of those beds. So as you go into spring and you're ready for the next production stage of finishing those beds, making them really plant ready, you're going to be as good as it gets going into that season and into a time of the year where you're really going to have the advantage of beds that are going to dry out earlier in the spring to get going already. You're already going to have the advantage of fertility mixed in or ready to be fertilized and mixed in. You're going to have the advantage of stable top with the weed barrier or the cover crop on top of it. You're going to have the advantage of having actually initiated a whole set of uniform beds that you could already be crop planning for, because you know exactly how many beds are in that garden. It's not an ambiguous amount. It's a very precise amount. I have 12 beds at 50 feet. I have 24 beds at 100 feet, and you can start to do your crop planning. So this is the look at a permaplot and permabeds that have just recently been formed. They're new permaplot and going into that fall and getting ready for finishing them, that next production stage in the spring. And I'll see you in the next one.